Welcome, Claire, to the podcast. Lovely to have you on here today.
Wonderful to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Absolute pleasure to have you. Look, you've had an incredible career in the IT industry for over 3 decades. You've seen how technology's, really evolved in how we work, our daily lives, and also how technology's been really used to develop some of the solutions for these really difficult, complex problems we're facing into. So before we sort of start to explore that a little bit more, can I ask you, what does sustainable growth mean to you?
Well, I mean, the opportunity around growth and sustainability and sustainable growth has changed rapidly over the time that I've worked in business and industry, and I'm sure you've seen that too, Bina. But growth, for me, is about not just how do you think about, what growth or share or contribution means for a company from a revenue standpoint. It also means how does growth represent the impact globally or to an economy. And the word sustainable is actually the bit that I'd sort of underline. As a company that has a mission about empowering every person and every organisation on the planet to achieve more, often when I'm talking to customers or to governments or to clients, I underline 2 words in it. I underline every and I underline planet. Because it's, and actually that mission has changed over time, because you might sort of just think about it as every, but actually if you're really thinking about inclusive every person on the planet, that's quite a big, audacious platform to be able to kind of live the values of sustainable growth. So as a company with those values and living up to that mission for the employees of the UK, that's what I think about.
I think that's a really lovely way of articulating the every and the planet. And we talk about sort of, the sustainable growth that delivers for people, planet and profits, which you're do you think that it's actually possible to deliver all 3?
Yeah, it does, but it doesn't happen just by accident. It happens with leadership purpose. So you have to think, and I'm sure, Bina, you experience this at KPMG too. You've got multi-vectors to be able to deliver on for your shareholders, for your people, for your clients, and for, certainly for the contribution I have on delivering that mission for Microsoft in the UK. And so you have to think about every day how you're balancing that, and you're having to have purpose around inclusion, purpose around sustainability, and purpose around actually how you achieve your business goals and business outcomes. Because if I think about how the mission for Microsoft plays out, sometimes you might think, oh, it's just a mission. But I think we use it like as a guiding principle that says, how do you deliver on that growth ambition? And if it's an ambition that might achieve a business goal but doesn't achieve the mission, we often think, actually, then maybe that's not an area to invest in, or maybe that's not a thing to do. And we also want to be a company that actually delivers sustainable growth by providing a platform to others to be able to expand their mission of sustainable growth. So if we're thinking about clients that we're working with, are we providing a platform for partnership that they can then use the technology to enable them to achieve their aspirations and goals, whether that be measuring sustainability, whether that be innovating to reach new clients, etc. So I think we try and make it as inclusive as possible and provide a platform for others to be able to build on that.
I just want to turn to technology just quickly, because everything you've talked about is the role of Microsoft and technology. But actually, if you step back, what is the role of technology in delivering sustainable growth? And sustainable growth isn't just about profits, it's about, people, customers, suppliers, etc. Do you have a sense of, how would you articulate that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you think in the 3 decades I've been in business, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Bina, the world has literally turned on its head. It's changed. If I think about what the world was like when I was coming into business, and how we operated, for everything from sort of email to social media to use of data. I mean, it was just like a completely different world. And if I think about the role that technology plays, whether that be measuring sustainable outcomes, thinking about how data will literally transform people's choices in life. So whether you think about things like healthcare, I was with a leading London hospital the other day thinking about not just some of the challenges they face of dealing with waiting lists and terrible administration they have to deal with. They're also thinking about how things like AI will solve really big healthcare problems like cancer in the future. So, you've got this juxtaposition of routine operational stuff compared to transformational stuff, and that's just sort of one hospital. I think if you think of technology as a platform, one of the things I'm proud of actually for the work that we do is actually technology has played a really important role of making society, in my opinion, much more inclusive. But again, it's about how you choose to use it. And I'm sure we'll get onto some of that as we go through. But, you know, if you think about people that grow up through school with dyslexia, if you think about people that may have some form of blindness, you know, they probably would have existed in a world where it was hard to learn, hard to see, and they didn't feel included in society. And there's so many technologies now that are just served up to them that means that they're able to learn well if they're a child with dyslexia through very simple things, add-ons in Teams, add-ons in Office that just make it much easier for them to learn. And recently we did a partnership with Haleon, you know, the company that was with GSK, and we've done a really cool application with them, with an application that we've developed called Seeing AI. So if you were going into a pharmacy in order to identify a drug that you needed to get, and you were blind or partially sighted, it will tell you automatically what the labels are, so you know you're picking the right drugs. So things like that just means that technology is providing a way that companies can grow, but companies can do that in a really inclusive way to make sure that they're serving all forms of society.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives people access to things that wouldn't have been, you know, accessible for, you know, when I was growing up.
No, you've been there looking at the
label,
label,
or asking somebody else to read it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So we've talked about the growth in tech, and it's not just about large organisations like yourself and Microsoft, but it's also this army of disruptors that are, you know, trying to fill these needs that some of the things you've articulated. And as we know, innovation is absolutely key to the growth of the UK economy, and it has been a very important part of how we see the growth coming through. But from the outside, it feels like Microsoft is really in its ascendancy right now. And I just wondered, I mean, you've talked a little bit about what's driving that, but I just wondered if you would be able to share, what is it that you feel really optimistic about?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot I feel optimistic at right now. I mean, I guess one of the things of working for a large tech innovator like Microsoft is you get to see like all the spectrums of the things that are sort of like early ideas to things that come to the forefront. And you know, I'm sure Bina, many of you and the viewers watching won't have missed that there's been a wave of innovation around AI. But if you think, actually, although it's got good news prominence right now, that's not like a new topic.
Yeah.
I think the investment that we made into AI and our partnership with OpenAI goes back some years. But if I take a step back before I perhaps talk about that topic around what is it that's driving, you know, what is it that drives us and what is it that's driving sort of growth and opportunity? You know, one of the things through the mission that I talked about earlier on that we have focused on as we've changed as a company, because I think Microsoft itself has been through quite a significant cultural transformation and a transformation in the way that we operate. You know, many people watching may remember the sort of early iteration of Microsoft, and our original mission, which perhaps is worth referencing on, was a PC on every desk and in every home. So it was a very like, it's a thing on a thing on a thing,
yeah.
You know? And there are not many companies that sort of achieve their mission and go, yep, check, yeah, we got that. So it was really about when Satya Nadella was appointed as the CEO 8 or 9 years ago now, it went back to kind of like, well, why does Microsoft exist and what's our existential purpose? And that was where the new mission came from. So one of the things we changed in the cultural change of Microsoft was around, rather than sort of being a product company that was focused on growth, we tried to think about being a platform company that's focused on the needs of customers. And if you can provide the right technology and innovation to them, that in itself will drive growth and opportunity. And we have a view that says for every market that we're in, how do we almost create a surplus of wealth and opportunity in those markets and inclusion for everybody by us being present in that market. And I went back to sort of living on the mission that we go after. And so that in itself means that we get to do some amazing things with governments, with small businesses, with startups, with innovators that use that platform of innovation in order to go after that. So it kind of makes it, you know, certainly leading the UK, you get to sort of play around in lots of different areas with the largest, most innovative of companies. You get to play with the startups. You get to partner with amazing companies like KPMG, etc., in order to go and do that. But if I think about where the growth itself is coming from, we've seen a huge shift of companies moving to the cloud. And if you think of that as providing a platform for innovation, and why are they doing that? They're moving there because they want something that gives them protection from security. We've obviously seen massive rise in cybercrime. So I think the risk of cyber threat is one of them. The other area is, innovation that they will get through what you have when you have all of your data and assets in the cloud. And data probably is something that every organisation is thinking, well, how am I going to make the most of that data so that I can think about innovating for my employees, innovating in new product lines, innovating in partnerships, etc., so they can think about how to bring all of that data together. New ways of work. Many of us are working in really, really different ways to what we did pre-COVID, and that means a different form of collaboration with people. So that area of sort of new way of working and collaboration is really important. And then the one I started on, which is this sort of advent of artificial intelligence and generative AI. And that one, I mean, we could have a whole podcast on its own on that. But that one, think of the waves of innovation that we've had. You had the PC era, you had the internet generation and era, you had the mobile phone era, the rise of the social media companies, etc. In our opinion, we are on the cusp of the next massive wave of innovation that will come, that will literally transform the way societies work, the way businesses operate, the way jobs will be created in the future. And as a result of that, it's a super exciting time to be in this industry.
I think you're absolutely right. Everything you've just said is quite exciting, but all the great, there's also the other side of it. And you alluded to some of the threats and some of the challenges that businesses have today, which wouldn't have necessarily existed pre-technology. And so I just wanted to pick up on that. You've talked about AI, and every peer I speak to talks about the importance of data.
Yes.
And AI in managing and using that data to impact for the positive, right? And in terms of data and AI, I've got a question for you. How do you sort of see the ethics around AI?
It's one of the most important and responsible leadership lessons of our time, if you think about it. And actually the decisions that companies like Microsoft and others take as we go through this big wave of innovation will be very important. And I think it's been a topic that probably for the last 5 years we have pushed very strong AI ethic frameworks. And that's everything from, how you think about ethics by design in the way that you build your products, how you think about pushing for the right regulation, how you think about the traceability of it, how you think about the tracking of it, etc., and what use cases, because it's not just the technology itself, it's actually how others will use the technology. So I think we also push for regulation on the use cases of that. So I think that making sure that we have the frameworks and thinking about how that will become a global framework, because if you think about how this technology will rise, it won't just be what the UK and the UK government do, it will be what happens in China or what happens in the US and other countries. So I think we're going to have to really think how that's all going to come together and make sure that the way that technology innovates and the use cases and how this gets built sets the right framework for creating a more inclusive society going forwards. And I do believe, in terms of some of the innovations that you will have seen, the announcement on this notion called Copilot that's going to get innovated into all of the office products. So think of Copilot as being someone that's just with you, Bina, like with you every part of your day in order to help you get your job done. So if you're a business leader, it might think about how you could do a draft of a response to an email that you could do. And you might not think that's perfect, but if you were going to send it to me and it's already given you half a draft, then that would actually get you started and would make you more productive in your day. If you're a developer and you know how much skills challenges we face in terms of shortage of technical and IT people, there's also a co-pilot for the developers, so that it means that they can be more effective, and all the logging and scripting that developers hate to do, it will get done for them. But you want to make sure that that's done in a really compliant, ethical and secure framework. Because if you think of KPMG and all of your wonderful client data, you wouldn't want that getting out and your proprietary IP and information being made available. So I think we want to make sure, and we're obviously advising clients very closely on this, making sure that that's done in a secure, closed environment.
I do think having a co-pilot does scare me a little bit, because all of a sudden I could be a lot more efficient than I am.
Exactly.
You touched on something I just wanted to pick up on. You talked about use cases, regulation, the sort of the global nature of some of the considerations, because we are working in an increasingly globally sort of connected world. But new disruption presents new opportunities. And if we sort of kind of sit back in the UK, what do we need to do in the UK to remain at that sort of cutting edge and at the front and forefront of technology?
Well, as you can imagine, Bina, this is a topic I discuss very regularly with the politicians. So, and actually, I think there's many things in the UK that we're very strong at. Right, we have a strong history of R&D and research here. We've got wonderful pharmaceutical companies. We have a great startup ecosystem, and we also have a great base of skill and capability, even if we don't have enough of it. But actually, I would say, whether we have the right regulatory environment in order to really thrive, and if we think about what that competitive landscape will look like, some of the fairly simple regulation that's now been initiated in the US and in the EU, that might be a place that we started strong, but you won't keep going on that. Yeah. And I mean, one of the topics I push very heavily in partnership with the government is to say, if you think about the provision of skill and capability, we're all fighting for the next person that has the greatest skill, and we haven't really thought from the ground up as to how we go and do that. And if you think about innovations like AI, the skills that the kids are being taught in the school today certainly won't be the jobs of tomorrow. So you need something that's much more of a lifelong learning. You need innovation in the levy. You need all of that stuff in order to be able to thrive. And I think you also have to, and it's tough for the governments right now, which is why it has to be done in partnership with business, because even as a leader in technology, I find it hard to keep up with what's going on. So if you imagine everything from the education institutes to the foundations that we rely on, like the healthcare service, which is struggling for money, to how you think about what the world of work is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years, it's quite hard to have an environment where the regulation is going to keep up with that. And so that's why I think partnerships between governments and businesses is going to be very important, and we're going to have something that's a bit more iterative as we go through, sort of underpinned by a strong foundation for a government framework and environment that does inspire startups and innovators, because I guess if they're faced with a choice, it's quite easy to go and invest in the EU or go and invest in the US or whatever. And I think that's the thing that we collectively have to help the government with.
Yeah, I think, you hit the nail on the head, iterative. It is an iterative process, because we're all trying to work out what does the new world look like. Yeah. Because we're sort of pivoting into this new sort of world of work, the way we do business, technology. And I just wanted to pick up on, you talked about collaboration between government and business. I think I don't know if this is something that I got right, but 30,000 organisations you partner with?
Yes, that's right.
I mean, okay, I can't even imagine how that works. But
and that's just in the UK.
That's in the UK, yeah. 30,000 organisations that Microsoft partners with. So when we talk about collaboration in the business world, across sector, how do you see that could work?
Yeah, I mean, we have... in a way, I'm blessed with this vector of being able to look at sort of what we refer to as the ecosystem of the UK. And we have, as you say, 30,000 technology companies. Wow. Think of it from everything from a new startup that's just got this great idea about AI that wants to use Microsoft technology, right up to the scale of global partnerships like we have with KPMG. So we have this full vector across every industry, every category of technology, security companies to data companies to collaboration companies. And so I often think we represent sort of the desires of the tech industry quite well, because it's not just Microsoft, it's actually the ecosystem that we support. Pretty much in every customer that we work with, it is a combination of Microsoft, our technology partners, a client or multiple clients. Our modus operandi is one of innovation by design, because you're trying to think about how a big technology company come together. What's the innovation that some of these smaller companies will play? What outcomes are you trying to drive? And then many of those customers have other clients that they're trying to work with. And so the ecosystem that you impact is quite significant. So I am a massive fan, if you get it right, of like collaborative partnerships to solve different business problems, because if you get the best of skill set from that set of individuals, and you imagine if you're trying to work on a technology innovation to solve climate science, like there's expertise that Microsoft will bring from a tech standpoint, but there might be a startup with a really great idea. There will be energy companies that have much greater expertise in what they're trying to solve for. And then we're both pushing together in partnership with the government in order to solve something or push on regulation, etc. And that will hopefully create that iterative thing I was talking about earlier on, which provides more innovation and opportunity to the UK.
And I used to work a lot with technology companies, and working with these disruptors who help disrupt the large organisations which need to disrupt in order to grow and be more inclusive. It is an ecosystem, but the reach it's quite astounding to watch how that reach of collaboration, how far it goes.
Yeah,
and it's not even just in the country. It's in the region. It's not in cities. It's in the regions. It's overseas as well. So Claire, through the pandemic, we saw how technology turbocharged the adoption of digital tools. We saw it when we all turned to Teams literally overnight. But how do you think that's going to evolve and continue as we go forward into the new hybrid world?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I talked about this sort of new world of work, and I think companies went from being very analog, if I could call it that way, where there was a very described pattern for the way that they would work, the way that they would operate, often much more sort of manual and physical connection, manual paperwork and physical connection, if you sort of go back pre-COVID times. And I think now organisations are sort of working through, like, what does workplace mean, if I sort of use the place word, because if you think, Bina, when we first met, I only knew Bina in this little square on Teams. That was sort of how I engaged with you through the the CBI exec forums that we sit on. And but now, if you think of the last couple of years since we've met, we bump into each other sort of all over the place. And again, it's because we've got joint clients, we're connecting with government, we're doing whatever. So I do think that people appreciate some of the lessons that they gained from COVID in the way they work. So both, the collaboration platforms like Teams and a way of working in a more connected way, in a connected environment. They also appreciate in their personal lives some of the flexibility that not being in the office, every day of the week brings to them, because it gives them a bit more choice in the way they do that. But I would say that leaders themselves are sort of wrestling with what does workplace mean, whether that be physically, are they assessing their real estate, what does that look like, right through to, if you think about the next generation of employees, what is their expectation? And if you have hired people and a lot of them like working from home and working through Teams, then how do you create a sense of belonging? How do you create a sense of connection? How do you retain the very best talent? Because if you are looking at a screen here for one company or here for another company, the experience may not be that different. It's what leadership does to wrap round that, to make it feel like, well, how are you going to create moments where you bring people into the office? How are you going to create moments of collaboration with clients? I mean, I would say on the topic of clients, I actually built a lot of very good relationships during COVID, and they were all online. And actually, certainly in a sort of breadth of engagement, I leveraged it very well. But I found that you didn't get as much depth through that. And so the complementary nature of being able to engage face to face and meet people has been a wonderful change to that. And so I think as people think about how are they going to create sustainable growth for their organizations, they're wrestling through how to create a place and a network and a connection, using technology and using physical connection, that means that they can be more competitive, more differentiated than others. But I do feel for the years to come, this is going to be one of those perennial dilemmas for leaders. And you'll see people are trying, oh, now you need to come back 5 days a week. Oh, no, you don't need to be at the office at all. And I think they're just playing with it. But the underpinning nature of it is, are you creating an environment that has a really strong culture, is inclusive, has got emotional connection with the employees, and how you're using technology really as a way to underpin that, to make employees feel like they're working for the best company on the planet.
Yeah. No, but you know what? Coming through COVID, you're absolutely right. We didn't meet physically, but what that did allow you to do was to connect with people that were far away from you, that you wouldn't have otherwise met.
That's right.
And so there's the balance, right? There's these sort of face to face and actually capitalising and accelerating those connections that you wouldn't otherwise be able to.
Yeah, because maybe we wouldn't have met as quickly as we did if we hadn't.
We probably wouldn't have.
Yeah,
so anyways, it was all for the good. All for the good. Just talking about leaders, you did talk about leaders. In our, well, I've been in business 30 years too. So in your time in the industry, how do you think leadership's changed or leadership styles changed?
I mean, hugely. It's I think, if I think back to your point on sort of inclusive leadership and sustainable growth, if you're going to have leaders that promote an environment of inclusivity to meet this goal of sustainable growth, this sort of one-way growth for profit, etc., is something I think that's changed radically since I was a young girl coming into the tech industry. And there's a couple of things I think that have radically changed. One of them, for the good, is there's more female representation. Certainly when I started to where there is now, we have a long way to go still on that. But I think the opportunity for inclusion of all kinds. I feel like in all the businesses that I work with, not only are we working to talk about how technology can solve problems, we're often doing diversity and inclusion hacks and how to think about things differently, etc. So I think that theme and the leadership from people in order to drive that isn't kind of like a little checkbox nice to do. It's like it's a business imperative to be able to do that. I think the other area that has changed massively, and there's still areas of improvement here too, but I think this notion that the best leaders are ones that lead with empathy, humility and inclusion. The empathy one in particular, there's a lot written about sort of empathetic leadership and how you lead with empathy, and probably in the early parts of my career that might have been seen as like a weakness. And now it's seen as a superpower. Yeah. So we're lucky to have a very empathetic, humble leader in Satya, and actually he's been an amazing coach to many of us to set the standards for kind of how do you really, really think about leading with empathy and leading with vulnerability actually. And we have a wonderful framework for all of our managers at Microsoft, which is around simple model. It's model, coach, and care. Model meaning, you have to role model and lead from the front. Coach, I hope things stands for itself. But the care one was one that got quite a lot of debate going on at Microsoft, because it isn't like, if you're a manager, you have to go and hug your employees. Feel free to do so in an inclusive way, of course. But actually it's caring for them as a whole person, like the 360 person. Caring for them when their performance isn't as good, caring for them when their performance is great, and caring for how they are going to make a valued contribution to society and how they're going to really have the best impact in what they do, both as a person and as a business person. So that framework has worked really well for us. And if you think about the kind of leaders that grows and develops and what's rewarded for being a great manager and a great leader at Microsoft, I hope that sort of emphasises in a way what's changed over the decades I've worked in business.
It explains a lot about the people I meet,
yeah.
And I think it makes people relatable, human. What a lovely model. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to turn to you, if that's okay.
Okay.
So if you could go back in time to share a bit of advice to the young Clare, what would that be?
Oh, it seems like a long time ago now. I think something about, often when I'm asked this question amongst employees, they often say like, well, how do I navigate this, or what should I do? And I often talk to them about like, dreaming big and not believing that anything's impossible. I think when I was my younger self, I had a lot of limiting beliefs about what was achievable. And I say that in like career, life, planet style, what actually is achievable. And I think I often thought in, wow, I've made it to Microsoft. Maybe, that's the end. And so I think it's through, some of the change in leaders that I have had the blessed of working with, that have sort of opened up my horizons about like, wow, dream big was quite small in my early rounds, and I have to dream bigger. And in one of Satya's books on Hit Refresh, he talks a lot about one of the principles we talk a lot about Microsoft, which is about growth mindset. And so I think this sort of dream big means that you have to unshackle these limiting beliefs. And I see it a lot in young girls, but I also see it in young men too. Sometimes they don't state it, but they have it. And so I think the thing that I think about, if we imagine a world, Bina, in 30 years' time with the next generation coming through, think about how the world of work is going to change. Think about how innovations like AI are going to fundamentally change the way of work. And if we all get it right, it will be a society with greater social mobility, more opportunity for all. It'll be a world where technology is a daily co-pilot to everybody, and it will be a world where the young Clare Barclay coming through will have already believed that she can dream big. She won't have limiting beliefs, and she will believe that she can be part of changing the world.
You are changing the world. And you know what, it's really inspiring to hear you talk like that, because I think you're absolutely right. People with the social mobility, with access, you've talked about inclusivity, you've talked about society. If we can really make a place for everybody in what we do, we'll all be better off, right? So that's lovely.
For sure.
You're clearly a very busy lady already with the role you have, and you've got, relatively young children, although I'm sure teenagers are quite self-sufficient. What sustains you? How do you sustain yourself and keep yourself sane?
Yeah, I mean, having focus on children do keep you grounded. They really do. But yeah, life is busy in this job, and so I think finding, one of the things I often talk about is actually trying to find time for myself. I'm an active practicer of yoga. I have two crazy Hungarian Vizsla dogs, so I walk with them. And actually, just we were coached recently about the importance of not just breathing and fresh air, but actually nature. And that sounds a bit sort of out there to put as part of this interview, but actually, when you're under a lot of pressure and you're dealing with a lot of crazy multitasking in these jobs, just having a time where whatever it is, whether it's an hour's yoga, an hour's walking, or even just, doing homework with the children or whatever, trying to have a little break from it, because I don't know about you, Bina, but work is always there and there's always a lot of it to go around. So I think just making sure I've got a bit more selfish with making time for me. And one of the things I'll talk to my team about is kind of like, what does the balance look like in my week? And it doesn't always look great, but as long as I have things that in there that give me energy, and then I'm finding time to make time for myself, I find that sort of lifts me, and I can be a better leader to others.
Look, this has been an incredible interview. I've really enjoyed it. I always do. I always enjoy chatting to you. I just want to sum up what I've taken away. I love your mission, and you talked about every planet, and I think that's really, really important. And you also talked about surplus of opportunity, surplus of wealth and opportunities, which is a lovely way of looking at how we can give back as organisations. You talked about the importance of tech. And most importantly, in terms of how we keep people connected and feeling that they belong to an organisation. So we talked about culture, inclusivity, we talked about emotional connection, which actually we saw firsthand, right? And we want to keep that alive as we move forward. You've talked about leadership, you've talked about purpose, you've talked about responsible leadership. Again, I think leadership styles have changed, and I love your three emotion, empathy, humility and inclusion. What a lovely trio to bring it together. But most importantly, I think we should leave our audience with the importance of technology, because it is the driver of innovation. It's going to dictate and shape the world we're living in and working in, and aspire to do. And it's going to solve the biggest complex issues that we're facing into. So I think I've summed up what I've taken away from this. I'm sure there's much more that I've missed off. But thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Bina. It's been a pleasure.